Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Lindsay Preservati, and if this is your first time here, thank you for watching. So today I wanted to do my makeup and also talk about my, talk about my pregnancy, because I had a very difficult pregnancy and it wasn't anything that I thought it was going to be. And so I just thought I would share that with you guys in case anyone can relate to it, or if anyone has had the condition I had. I don't know. So I'll just get into it kind of while I'm doing my makeup. It might be kind of hard actually because there's so much to talk about with it. Okay, I'll try. So the condition that I had with my pregnancy was called, I had a placental abruption. And that's when your placenta starts detaching from your uterus before you have given birth. So what kind of how it all started was I had an ultrasound and they said that my placenta was close to my cervix. So the edge of it was like, usually it implants, like the prime spot for it to implant is at the top of your uterus, but mine implanted at the bottom, near the bottom of my uterus, and it wasn't completely covering my cervix. That's called placenta previa, I think, I'm pretty sure. So mine wasn't completely covering it, just the edge of it was kind of near it. And they said, because I think I was like 20 weeks along when they noticed that, and they said that, like normally what happens is that as your uterus grows, the placenta grows up with it. So it moves away from it, which is good, which is what you want to happen. And so they weren't concerned with it too much. And they just said at each ultrasound, they'll just measure it and see how far it's moved up. So everything was fine. And I went on as normal with my pregnancy. So at about, I think it was in the beginning of January, I remember, because I was supposed to go to a dental convention in Boston with my work, and it was the day before that we were gonna go. And I went to the bathroom, and that morning I was at work and I just noticed a little tiny bit of blood. And so I kind of freaked out, but it wasn't like, because I know like bleeding when you're pregnant, like that can be very normal. And so I was kind of freaked out, but I knew that it is very like common. So I called my doctor and they just said, they actually told me, they said, monitor it, but if you're concerned, then definitely come in. So I was concerned. I just, it is my first pregnancy. I had never experienced this before. And so, and I was due also, I forgot to say this. I was due on May 27th was my due date. And so this is in January that this happened. And so, I went up to my doctor and I was there literally all day long. I didn't think I'd be there that long, but they admitted me. And I called my husband but I told him not to leave work because everything was fine, the baby was fine, and I went up there and I kind of just, it was kind of relaxing, but I kind of just I was there all day and they just did some blood tests and they said that, the baby was fine. They had me on the monitor all day. And I asked them when they discharged me, I asked them, so they didn't find anything. They just said, this can happen. Your placenta is low, so sometimes this can happen. And they really weren't too concerned. And so I was discharged and I asked them, I said, should I still go to the convention for work? It's in Boston. They said, yeah, like do everything normal. Just no heavy, like any normal pregnancy, no heavy lifting, none of that. So I get discharged and I go up to Boston that night with work, and it was like we had had dinner and we were going back to our hotel room, and it was around like 9 o'clock at night, and I went to the bathroom, and this time there was like a lot more blood. And that kind of scared me. So thankfully I was in Boston, and my coworker, she was like, so like the nicest person ever, and she drove me right to the closest hospital, and I called them beforehand. So again, I was admitted, and they did all the same tests, basically everything they did before, and I told them what happened earlier in the day. And my husband came up, so we didn't end up leaving Boston until I think 3 o'clock in the morning is when they discharged me. With this, they didn't have a lot of answers, and I guess with a placenta on the ultrasound, you can't see underneath the placenta, so they couldn't see where exactly it was bleeding from, or like how much of it has detached. They can't detect that on there's no test to detect that. So it was kind of that was probably throughout this whole thing the most frustrating and the most difficult part. It was so frustrating because I just wanted to know like what exactly was happening and why it was happening. So this video is probably going to be very long. I'm just warning you. A month goes by, and it was a really long time. No bleeding, nothing at all. Everything's normal. All my appointments are normal. And then I think it was the beginning of March. Um, I had another bleed, and it wasn't like my other ones. It was very it was small, it was such a, but I always, every time I had one, I called my doctor and I let them know. And so they said, okay, come up and, we'll do the normal thing again that we did last time. So we go up there, and because it was on a weekend, so he was home, and they tell me that they're sending me up to Boston, and like an ambulance was like there to bring me up to Boston, and I was like completely caught off guard. I wasn't I I was so surprised, and I was not prepared for that at all. And so I was there for like 4 days, and they discharged me because I hadn't bled since I was there. And like my blood tests were fine, everything was fine. They monitor you every day for like a half an hour. The baby was fine, and like everything was fine. So I get to go home, and then literally 2 days later, I had another. It was in the middle of the night. It was like 2 o'clock in the morning. And I remember waking up, and I thought I was peeing the bed, but I had another bleed. And this time it was like the biggest one I've ever had. And me and my husband, I was freaking out. Um, I, it was just literally the scariest thing ever. And I didn't know if we lost her. And and so I remember, like every time it was just so much blood. It was so scary. And so we go up to the hospital, we call them, go up to the hospital in Plymouth again, and then that time, I knew they were gonna send. So this time I was a little bit more prepared, even though it was like 2 o'clock in the morning. I remember throwing a bunch of snacks into my purse before we left. And so we go up there, and I knew they were going to send me up to Boston again. I kind of knew it was going to happen. So they send me up to Boston.